Do you neglect your obligations? Are you a slave to your leisure? This is At the Root of Knowledge, and in this episode we're going to be talking about sloth and diligence.
Welcome to At the Root of Knowledge, where we discuss timeless principles and attempt to answer several of life's most challenging questions through conversation. On this show, we discuss topics such as human behavior, virtue, vice, and natural law. Our primary concern is to learn and share the truth. I am Daniel Scheck, and with me is my co-host, Philip Barzik. Please know we are not experts, and just like many of you, we're here to learn. Tonight we're going to be talking about slothfulness and diligence. Hello, Phil.
Hello, Daniel.
How are you doing?
I'm well. How about yourself?
Better than I deserve.
It's really good to hear.
Yes, definitely. Life's been going pretty great.
That's very good, very good. So, I think we decided we were going to start out with sort of a why it's important to us to discuss it, and then why it's important on a larger scale, how it's relevant, how it affects all of us. Sloth, that is.
Mm-hmm.
So, for me, one of the biggest reasons is that it leads to a detachment from reality.
Okay.
And I get caught up in things that don't really matter. You know, it starts small, like I'll shrug off responsibility and I'll get comfortable being just where I am and not moving forward, not pushing harder towards my goals. And then eventually it leads to me actually being detached from those goals and from, in a way, reality, and living in, I'd say, almost a dream world, if you will.
Like, do you feel like you don't care about moving forward at all?
I feel like I don't care about the right things. The right things don't mean enough to me. Things that should affect me. For instance, someone committing a crime. I feel like I've been detached in such a way that, like, I don't feel like sympathy for the people who were affected by it necessarily. It's just, well, that's part of life.
Right. You ever feel like everything's just fine the way it is? There's no reason to put more work into it, or maybe that question comes up of,
or if you do put more work into it, it's not worth it.
Right. I know with myself, at least, a lot of times when I feel like I'm being lazy, I'll ask myself, or tell myself, or recognize that there's something I should be doing, and I'm going to choose to do something that's not productive, like sit in bed or watch YouTube for hours or whatever, and I'll just tell myself, like, oh, it's okay. Even though I know I'm not using the resources, the biggest one being my time, probably, to move forward and have any sort of outcome that I'm going to be proud of in the future,
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's relevant to me, at least, because it is a consequence of me not moving towards a vision of myself, the vision of myself I've generated for who I want to become, and the vision of what changes I would like to affect and how I'd like to contribute to the world around me. And either lack of commitment, lack of concern will lead me to waste my time and be slothful.
Yeah, I can definitely relate to that. Another thing, and I think this is true with myself, and I think I see it as a more than just myself. I think it's a social problem as well, is that it's when you're lazy, it's very easy to become disinterested in things and take things for granted.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a big side effect of slothfulness. Like, have you ever found yourself just like, you're doing something and you should be interested in it, but you're just not, and you just keep telling yourself, I'm completely bored. I'm bored of this.
Yeah, more times than I'd like to admit.
Mm-hmm. Like, I think that's, in a sense, slothfulness.
I don't know. I feel like there's always going to be times when it's hard, and the weaker part of you, or maybe it's an outside force that's beyond our realm of consciousness, could be very well. I think a lot of times it's internal, definitely. The weaker part of you is always trying to discourage you, always trying to tell you to slow down, or always questioning whether or not you want to do something. And sometimes I think you just got to ignore those voices. Like, I don't think I think you should be well acquainted with issues, well acquainted with things that conflict you, because there's probably a reason for it. But sometimes,
yeah, I wouldn't say don't listen to them, like tune them out. That's not to say give in to it, but I would say you have to negotiate with it, because if you become a tyrant to yourself, you're going to be resentful towards yourself at some point in the future.
right? Yes, I mean, you can't just, if there's a giant noise in the background, you can't just push it
Pretend
aside.
like
You've
it's
got
not there.
you've got to address it. You've got to identify it and recognize that it's there. But that doesn't mean you need to give it room to control you, or room to.
No, by no means.
But
it's easy to do.
It takes a lot of effort to keep the line. I feel like the line between recognizing, tendencies and forces, whether they be internal or external, pushing you in a certain way. Identify that they're there and try and understand where they come from and why, and then not giving them voice enough to push you in the wrong direction, or to the point where you get wrapped up in these forces. Because
I agree with that.
Because I've been there, and it's a downward spiral. And I don't know, with slothfulness, this kind of goes back to what we were talking about with gluttony. Like, I think there's a line, because it's like, when am I right? You can't live always in extremely high tension. There's got to be periods where you allow yourself to relax, and have some leisure. But where do you?
Yeah.
And it's easy to let that go too far. I know I've done it several times in the past and felt horrible about it, where I've wasted entire days just because, like, I don't want to do anything today.
Oh,
even though,
definitely.
like, I have the resources and I have the potential, for that energy, to keep going.
Right. There wasn't any physical ailments that
kept me from it.
yeah.
Like sometimes, you work a 60, 70-hour week, whatever. For me, that's a long week. Like if I work 60 hours in 5 days, 60 to 70, that's pretty long, especially once you start getting up to 70, because that really starts creeping in on my sleep schedule. I don't feel bad about sleeping in till noon on a Saturday if I've worked a 70-hour week, and I might even plan to sleep in till noon on Saturday. But when it's like you've got plenty of sleep all week, and then you waste Saturday, and you don't even maybe I mean, it's been a long time since I've gone this far. I feel like you sleep until like 3 o'clock. I've done it before. It's like, why? Or you wake up and then you don't do anything productive with the day at all.
Yeah, you just idly
watch YouTube,
yeah.
or even sit down and stare at a wall. I've been there. And I'm not saying like there's not a good time. Like I think for me at least it's healthy. Sometimes at the end of the day, just sit out on the porch and just sit there. I do spend some time just doing absolutely nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think maybe, 5, 10,
some
15.
some of that time also can be spent in thought.
Mm-hmm. Right. You need to think.
It's not completely idle.
Right. But it's like, where do you draw the line? And when is it to the point where it's destructive? When
it's hard to find that line, because there are people who are very highly efficient and they work day and night every day.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't seem to affect them. But I think that's a very small minority of people.
Yeah.
But I would say in some ways it comes down to, are you at least the very least, I would say it comes down to, are you achieving something of productiveness towards a milestone? But I would say that that's not where you should draw the line necessarily.
Right. I don't know. I think slothfulness has its own thing, but I think largely it's a consequence of one of two things. Not having a vision of what you would like to affect in the world, what impact you would want to have, or the person you want to be. Not having that is where a lot of laziness flows from, is not having any sort of vision or mission.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe to be a little bit more accurate, any sort of mission, because why would you be productive and worry about being efficient if there's no big picture that you're always going to look to? It's just, you feel bad even if you don't have a vision or a mission in your life. You feel bad when you waste your time, because you wasted time. But why would you do it any differently if it's not gonna lead you towards something bigger? Your why, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And then I think the second thing, the big thing where it comes from, is bad prioritization or poor commitment to that vision. Because I feel like if you have a mission that you are passionate about, you're fired up about, maybe your mission is you want to be a good influence, you want to bring people up. Maybe your mission is something like, when I die and I'm standing in front of God and he says, I've given you all these gifts, and what have you done with them? Maybe even that question, that could be your mission right there, is how am I going to answer that question?
Or to have a good answer for that question.
Yes, that could be your mission. And I think that would be an example of a good mission. You know what I mean? Your mission could be as simple as, I want to do God's will. or I want to go to heaven, and I think there's going to be, there's a lot more than just that, but there's a big picture reason behind
I
all
would
of
say
it.
that's a good big picture reason, but even so, I would say you still should start. Like, you should have smaller things in play as well. You shouldn't just have one large picture.
I think you need a mission. For me, it's answering that question, the very question I asked you. And it's gone through refinement, and it could change a little bit, but for me, that is my mission, is being able to not, getting to that point. And this is a very, that's a big mission. Like, at least if you, know that question as I know that question, and as many people I know that question. Like, when I get, if I'm before the judgment seat, and I'm asked that question, I just want to smile and be completely confident, and not even have to answer it, because and not feel any shame, because the last thing I want to do is be like, I gave you all of this stuff. I gave you all of these resources. I gave you all these motivations, all these graces. I surrounded you with all these great people. I don't want to go, oh, yeah, you're standing before, it's so incomprehensible sitting before the throne of God, that I'd be arrogant to think that I even would be able to respond to whatever question that was posed, but I'd like to imagine that I wouldn't have to, for a good reason. Like, I would feel confident.
You would feel that your actions have spoken for you.
Yes.
See.
And, right. That can't be it. Because I think we're just we need explicit instructions to move there.
Right.
Right?
That's what I was saying, is that
enough.
you can't just have your one, you can't just have a pinnacle.
That's your driving force, though.
Well,
That's what I would argue.
Yes.
You use goals, but those are just...
You can have that, but that's not the only thing you should have. That's what I'm saying.
Right, I agree.
You need to have other smaller things
to help you push there.
They're pushing you towards that, but at the same time, you still have something that you can say, okay, I'm going towards that because I've hit this goal.
Right.
Because, just for instance, say you met someone and you've convinced them to change their life, to stop drinking, or to stop shoplifting.
Okay.
That could be something you could say, I was a good influence on that person. I've been a good influence. In the past year, I've influenced 10 people to make positive changes in their lives.
Yes, but that's just a goal. That's just a tool. I think, my opinion, that's just a tool to drive you, to help you move, to help you execute your driving force, to help you reach in the end, really. Because the goal is not the end. I think it's just a piece you use, an instruction piece you use to keep you moving towards the end.
But with those goals, do you think there's a certain amount of goals, if you were to accomplish them, is that a point where you could say, okay, I'm going to rest, I can take a little bit of a break? Is that where you would say to draw the line?
See, if we were perfect, we wouldn't have to make all these rules for ourselves.
Well, that's very true. But if we were perfect, we wouldn't be slothful.
If we were perfect, I don't think we'd have to make goals, because we would just always be moving towards that end.
Correct.
I think it's just because we're human, and we need instructions, because we're too dumb to
figure it out.
Shallow-minded. We're too shallow-minded. We need shallower goals, to help us get there. And the less attached, the less...
Well, I don't think it's just shallow-minded. Like, I think we also, we have a very limited attention span. And if we don't feel like we're making progress towards something, we will lose interest in it.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Yep.
And
I
that's
agree.
why that would be another argument as to why you need smaller incremental goals to get you towards your pinnacle goal of your life.
Right. Yeah, but going back to what you're saying about like writing rules, if you write the rules, you got to stick to them. Otherwise, you have no integrity, and that's that's entirely an internal thing. So that's why a lot of times I'm afraid to write. I'm afraid to write rules. I know a lot of successful people that do write rules and have written rules. I won't say his name. If he's listening, he knows who he is. But one person I look up to being very successful told me about back when he first started as a salesman for selling some very expensive products. He told me that he would not take lunch until he made a certain number of calls every day. And if he never met that number of calls, he never took lunch. He wouldn't take lunch that day.
So it's almost as to incentivize him?
Yes, I think. And also maybe to set the tone of this is what's important, and if I cannot, and, in a way to, yes, incentivize him, but also to set the priority, my leisure time isn't worth, I don't know how to put it properly, but my leisure time is not important enough to come before my work as a salesman, unless I affect a certain amount first. But I've tried that, writing rules, and I think ideally you wouldn't have to write those rules. I think ideally you don't worry about, you don't wrap yourself up in writing rules with when you need to stop. If you got your priorities straight already, in theory, you shouldn't have to write those rules, because the priority of doing the right thing is gonna, if it's important enough to you and you can keep it, close enough to your heart and close enough to your will at all times, the other things, I think, should just fall into line, and you won't overindulge with taking a break, sitting back, spending all day doing, you know what I mean? You won't worry about that stuff if you are close enough with your vision and your goals and in executing
because it almost becomes something that's digging at your mind when you are idle. You keep thinking about that goal. I'd agree with that.
Like it'll automatically pull you in a line. You won't have to worry about.
But the issue there becomes then setting your priorities straight, which is not necessarily an easy thing to do.
No, and it takes time. Even I feel like it could take years and years. Like it's something you're gonna have to, once you decide that, you're gonna come up with a mission in your life and you're gonna move towards it, and you're gonna develop a person you want to become. Like that's something you're gonna keep developing and keep developing, and you can keep developing until you're dead. And it probably should be active and alive, because if you're gonna devote your entire life to this mission, you shouldn't pin yourself down to a thought you had back in the beginning. No, it should be something that's fluid and moving, and you re-examine and rethink about and refine over a period. Where was I going with that? But yeah. Yeah, I think that mission everything else will fall into line.
So then maybe we should talk about why, or maybe we should talk about a little bit of a process for putting your priorities in check.
And right.
And keeping them in there, because they're bound to change. There's a million outside factors that could wind up changing your priorities.
Yes, and right. The one thing is not having any vision, I think, is a large reason why you fall into slothfulness, is not having that. And the other thing is, like you said, the priorities falling out of line. And, I think, like you said, outside factors, like the desire for gratification, you know what I mean? The desire for not putting in effort, I guess, is one, a disdain for effort and fear of pain, because with growth, there's always pain.
Yeah.
So you let that fear of the pain, that fear of failure, which is a real pain, which you really have to feel if you want to keep moving, but you let that pain,
well, I mean,
deter you.
To change, really, a part of you has to die. If you want to change yourself, like you want to change a part of you, there is some part of you that's going to have to diminish.
Like die completely?
I mean, it may be a small part that has to die completely, but
like an attachment, maybe an internal attachment that you just
that
have
could
to
be,
kill.
yes. I mean, for instance, if you said, you wanted to, maybe you have a sweet tooth and you say, I want to be healthy and I want to start eating better.
Mm-hmm.
There's still going to be that attachment to sweet foods, candy, to junk food.
Right.
And in order to overcome that part of you has to die off.
But is it ever really dead? Can you really ever kill a part of yourself? I'm sure you can learn to put it in its place, but for me at least, maybe I just have not. Maybe I just haven't.
That's not to say, it's going to take 2 weeks and you're done.
Do you think you ever really can get to a point where
I think you can.
You don't want it, that part of you will never come back because it's gone?
I think so. I don't think it's an easy thing to do, and I don't think it takes, it could take the better part of a lifetime to do, especially depending on the amount of initial attachment there is to it. But I think yes, and you can. Potentially, you can.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Because thinking about it,
and maybe that's a psychological thing where you just have to train yourself to think in a certain way. Just that you have to almost make an association with, for instance, junk food. You have to make the association that this is bad for me. And then that becomes, as soon as junk food even enters your mind, or as soon as you see it or anything, you automatically, you've trained your thoughts to say, I can't eat that because it's bad. And at a certain point, it's
automatic.
Yes. It's almost beyond second nature.
But do you think that you could ever get to the point where you overstructure your thoughts to the point where there's not room for new things to pop up? Or do you think that that's not really, do you think that bringing it all into order, you'll be able to decide more clearly, effectively, how you want to think. I mean, do you think there's ever room for, maybe let your mind do its own thing ever?
Yes. Yeah, I mean, I don't think you have to have everything in its place. And like once you get everything in its place, it's there and that's it. And nothing else. You take nothing new comes in, and cuz at that point I feel like you'd still be stagnant.
You think you should be trained to always, you should always have a process for how you're going to think through things? Or do you ever think like maybe let it be free to move and progress on its own for a little while? Like, cuz I generally think more, I don't know, is a very, very complex issue, I think.
Could you give an example?
Okay, so an example would be you start questioning, let's say, your faith.
Okay.
And maybe there's something that really actually conflicts you about your faith. There's a real something, whether it be real or not, in tune with reality. There is some area where you feel conflict between perhaps two different ideas.
Okay.
About your faith. Let's say, your religion.
Yeah. Well,
do you let that noise exist? Or do you structure your thoughts and go, nope, close off, we're not questioning that. We have our structure.
It's hard to say.
Yeah, I mean I can't say that I have the right answer for that.
Yes, I would say it's going to depend on a situation. But I would say, I mean, you listen to it to a certain extent. You take it with a grain of salt, for sure that, okay, so you have a doubt in it, but just because you have one doubt in something doesn't mean you throw it in the trash.
Right.
And you could use another example. Say you think your wife is being unfaithful.
Mm-hmm.
Just because you're doubting her faithfulness to you, does that mean you're going to go and get a divorce the next day?
Well, you can't get it. Okay, this is the way I see it.
Well, I understand that the way you see it, there
Divorce
is no valid divorce, and I agree with that. But I'm using this as an example
right, I see what you're saying. You just throw it in the trash because there's
and it doesn't even have to be your wife. You could say just in a relationship, you're not married. You think that your girlfriend is being or your boyfriend is being unfaithful. Like, do you just throw it in the trash? No, but at the same time, you don't just disregard that.
Right.
You either bring it up with them, and I would say if you're doubting your religion, you research it. Talk to someone who might have more knowledge than you about it.
Definitely. But thoughts are going to come, in my experience has been, thoughts like that are going to come when you're on your own. You know what I mean? Still. And there is nobody to turn to. You're still going to be faced with these thoughts. Maybe it's when you're sitting in bed before you go out for the night. Maybe it's when you're on the road and you're driving somewhere. Maybe whatever. And
I would still listen to it. I mean, don't spiral out of control with it.
Right.
But I mean,
you can't ignore it because it'll just fester if there's no answer.
Exactly. And then at a certain point that it's going to manifest itself in some other way.
Right.
And start affecting you, and it will definitely be a detriment if you just...
But there's that fear, especially if it comes down to something like religion. And the religion is just a very violent, I don't want to say violent, a very touching one to actually speak about, one with, for me at least, most meaningful impact. But, I've had these same thoughts with people, with relationships, like when I'm asking, should I walk away from this person? It's a big, should I say goodbye to this person or whatever? but religion's an easy one, and it's terrifying sitting there because it's like, can I let this doubt come before my conviction or the responsibility and all these years I've put into building this structure? Can I let this doubt have a voice, because it could take control? And knowing that I am very vulnerable to stuff like that, like if I listen to it, it would not be that crazy for it to control and get so loud that I let it control me, And at the same time, like you said, I know I can't just ignore it and say, okay, goodbye, whatever.
Yeah.
This is a little bit, I feel like we're getting a little bit off track with slothfulness, but
It is a little bit, but I think slothfulness can definitely relate to religion or spirituality in general.
Yes.
I mean, I think it would be slothful to disregard it.
Yeah. Okay.
I think that would be slothful if you were
spiritual apathy, like you're not going to put in effort to weed through all this and come to terms with it.
Yeah.
With the questions.
Definitely. I would say that's a form of sloth, yes.
Yeah. That's actually in the 2020 Webster's Dictionary, one of the definitions is spiritual apathy and inactivity.
Ah, okay. So I would say yes, that's a very good definition for it then. I mean, another definition that St. Thomas Aquinas gives is sorrow in the presence of spiritual good.
Sorrow in the Is there anything more that goes into that?
That's
in its definition, or
that's all I have here.
Okay. Sorrow in spiritual good.
Sorrow in the presence of spiritual good.
Sorrow.
So to see something good happening and be sad about it.
Like, maybe because you look at it and you know that you're being called and you know that you're being or
okay,
what do you take
for an example? I would say maybe say there's a burning building, and I mean, this is a hypothetical situation, but you and another person are standing outside of the burning building, and you hear someone screaming for help inside. And that other person rushes inside and saves that person, brings them out. And the reaction you would think to happen would be, you're happy that that person is safe.
Right.
But I would argue that a possible reaction could be that you feel sad about that happening because you didn't do it.
Right.
And that could be a form of selfishness, that you wanted to be the brave one who saved the day.
Okay, yeah, and I've felt that feeling many times before when I've not to that extreme, but there are definitely
that was a very extreme example.
I've seen people stand up and do something and go like, well,
why didn't I do that?
Why didn't I? Yeah, exactly. What am I, a coward, a little child? What am I, selfish and stuck up? Am I just too lazy? Was I not willing to put in the effort? Yeah, I've felt that many, many times when I've seen other people do good things, especially in front of me, and feel bad that it wasn't, why didn't I do the same thing? Why did it take that man?
Yeah, I would.
Going
that's
against
my
the grain,
interpretation
or even
of
speaking up about something when you're in a conversation. And one guy speaks up, and maybe this is something that's been eating at you. Like maybe you're talking about someone behind their back, and the one guy speaks up and is like, hey, and they remind them of all the good that they've done and how this person would never attack you, would never say these things about behind your back. It's like, why wasn't I the person to speak up and say that? Why did I sit by silently and
Right.
and let that?
And
go
maybe
by?
you even know that person better.
Mm-hmm.
And like then you feel like
You're
you had an
more
obligation
qualified.
to it.
You're more
Yeah.
qualified and more obligated to say, right. Yes, yeah. I felt that way many times. And I've even felt that way when the opportunity to do that was there,
Mm-hmm.
and I didn't, especially in conversation. It's like I had the opportunity to educate this person. Not only that, I had the obligation to defend something that I knew was true, you know, and I didn't. And walking away from conversations and going like, I was silent. And maybe I excuse myself because, well, I'm not going to change their mind.
Yeah. I have had that many times too. I've been in debates with people, and you get into the heat of the debate and you make your points, and I've had been in some debates where like I've won the debate, but instead of moving forward and saying, so now that we've established this, how can we go forward? I've just simply said, I won. Victory for me. You're the loser.
Mm-hmm.
And like,
yeah,
that's
popular. The popular way to do it.
That
it's
is
like
the
debate,
popular way to
debate.
do it. It's the you've now proven someone wrong. You've embarrassed them in front of everybody, or if it's just between two people, you've successfully
proved your point.
Yes.
You've shown that you are correct. You are competent.
Yeah, but that's not the way.
No, that should never be.
That's not the honorable way to do it, and I don't think honor is
It's not the
mentioned.
useful way to do it either. It's not the way with the most utility either, even though it's also not the honorable way to do it.
No, but I don't think honor is. Maybe honor is not the right word. Maybe noble, the noble way to go about it. And I don't think that, or honor for that matter, is really considered much in society today.
No, it's not. It's not. It really isn't.
And maybe this is a little bit of a tangent, but maybe that's because there's a bit of a connotation with in the Renaissance, when there were nobles, they were the high up people, but they were the king's chosen few who were protecting his country, and maybe it's seen as condescending now if you're acting in a noble manner.
Right, and what isn't ever recognized is the poorest people, the people at the socially bottom of the totem pole, are just as much called to and able to show nobility and honor as the people at the very top.
Yes.
But you definitely agree with that. But I think another part, going back to the conversation part, is, why is it so popular nowadays? Let's go into this debate. Let's go into this argument. And just, we have to win, and or they have to lose. And that's the attitude.
I would add to that and say, we have to win, or they have to lose by whatever means necessary.
Right.
And
whether it's humiliation.
Exactly. With that, that's what I mean, is it's not just presenting a well-structured argument. It's, how can I make this person look incompetent? Anything I can do to make their argument less well-structured. Less valid, yes, exactly.
And it's like, why is this the attitude? Why isn't it, well, let's go into this and come out having produced the most good? Why isn't that the attitude? Why is that's the way with the most utility, but it's so selfish and divisive, It's like, look at our world today. Look at how divided people are with group identity, groupthink. It's like, why couldn't it just be, let's come together and bring out the most good? You know what I mean? Why don't we affect the most positive change through this conversation? Why don't we come to as much of a consensus as possible about things we agree on and try and get more resolution.
Work from a point of unity instead of division.
Yeah, it's like, why don't we get more resolution on our differences? And that's not, a resolution on how we can make things better and not just fight and argue. I'm right, you're wrong. And I'm not saying I've never done it. I've done it plenty. And you know what? It's like the popular thing to do, right? For some reason nowadays. Let's just argue about it. Let's just, create tension and try and give an outlet for people, or
I don't know. I don't know why that's the way it is. I don't agree with it. I don't think that's the way it should be. I think a side effect of that might be that people start to, you mentioned group identity. I think that a side effect of that is
people too lazy to think for themselves.
Well, yes, and you start to stop seeing uniqueness of opinion.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe that's a conversation for
its own topic. Yeah,
another episode.
It definitely could be, but that definitely is, I think, lazy. One aspect of like people aren't willing to put in the effort to stand on their own.
Yeah, and they don't want to put in the effort to figure out what they
think is right.
Yes, what they believe that is good. This person has some good ideas, and
Bull.
Yep.
I like them. I'll put myself behind that person. And you've got entire giant groups of people divided.
And that's not to say one side does it more than the other, or any group of people do it more than the other. I think that is a societal issue.
Yep.
As a whole. People identify with a group opinion.
Yes. Groupthink. What do they call it? The common mind? Or there's a lot of terminology, social terminology, to vaguely remembering some of the things I learned about in high school and history class and social studies. But yeah, there's a...
Yeah. So then going forward, how would you say we can counteract some of these slothful actions, slothful thoughts,
Yep.
ways of being?
Right.
How would you
have that stronger driving force? Have that mission that you were committed to,
and that will lead to a form of diligence,
and develop in your own way and as far as is necessary ways to move towards that. Whether it be goals or milestones. And yes,
I would say with your vision, I think, at least in my experience, many of the people who I've met, they feel like when it's their vision, it's something that they have to do on their own. Like you have to withdraw yourself from the world and come up with your vision on your own. And it has to be entirely your idea. And I don't think that's true. I think you can take other people's opinions into consideration. You can have a wide variety of references, I think, when you're deciding what you want your vision to be.
Right. Like, it's got to be personalized to you as an individual.
yes,
Otherwise, you
but
won't
that-
care about it.
yeah.
But, right, I agree 100% because it can't be like, oh, this is my exclusive. What, are you going to develop a whole new principle of reality that has never been seen before and then, construct a whole mission around your life? Which you could. I mean, what's Elon Musk's mission? I can't imagine looking 30 years down the road and waking up in a world where we're not on Mars. And that's his mission. I think that's pretty darn, personalized.
And
But it doesn't have to be like that, right?
No. And I mean, you could say it's unique, but I don't think he's the first person who's had aspirations similar to that.
Similar, yes, very much, yeah.
But it's just he's the one who we could say is closest to achieving that goal. And that's not to say like your vision has to be so personalized that you are the closest one in the world to achieving it. For instance, your vision of going to heaven and being able to answer that question.
Not having to answer
Not having to answer that question. There could be many people in the world who are in that state right now, where if they died tomorrow, they wouldn't have to answer that question.
Right. Right.
But that doesn't mean that you shouldn't have the goal yourself.
Mission,
Yes.
because that's the end.
Yes.
That's the end. That is the mission. It's not.
Yeah, that is
the
the
goal.
purpose.
Yes.
Do you think there's any other areas, like maybe could you rely on other people to keep you on your path and to set you straight if you're straying?
I definitely think that if you surround yourself with the right people and your mission is important enough to you where it will be maybe it's obvious to you, and if you got the right people around you and they know what your mission is, they're going to hold you accountable. If they're the people that you need, if you are surrounding yourself with the right people and they know what you are striving for, they will speak up and say something when the time calls for it.
Mm-hmm. If they see you acting in a way that
Right, but
is
I don't
going to be a detriment.
Right, but I don't think that. Right, but that's the whole thing, is you got to have the right people, because you cannot expect somebody else to take care of your life for you. You know what I mean? Or stand in for you. You cannot.
You can't be dependent on someone
No,
else.
you can't be dependent on that. So, yes, it's a good thing. Do you have control over it? Well, you have control over who you have around you, and you have control over how you influence them. But
would you say you have the obligation to surround yourself with the best people? The people who are going to be able to influence you in the best way?
yes.
Is that to say that you couldn't influence someone else?
To be better?
Yet you couldn't have someone around you who is...
Lower on the totem pole, so to speak?
Yes. Not necessarily in a condescending way, but...
No, yeah,
but
right.
And try and
Try
strive
and lift other people up.
to influence them to a higher good.
Yes, everybody else is their unique individual entity, and it's not your place to put them in certain places. You know what I mean? Like, they are on their own, and...
But that doesn't mean you can't offer your help.
No, that's right. And when, like, I think ideally, you will exist in a community of people where everybody, ideally everyone is trying to bring everybody up. But you can't force anyone to try and bring you up. You can't. That's outside of your circle of influence. But what you can do is try and pick the right people to do that, and what you can do is be that person that's going to lift everybody else up regardless of what anyone else does. So yes, and I think you're responsible. Yeah, like that's like what you should do is try and bring other people up. People at the bottom, everybody you influence. That should be your effect. I think ideally that should be your effect with everybody. So yeah, and I would just not only can you do that, you should do that, I think.
Yeah. I mean, this whole topic really has reminded me of one book in particular that I read. Is Start With Why by Simon Sinek. And if you are really struggling with sloth and struggling to find a purpose for your life, I would recommend it as a
What was it called?
Start
With Why by Simon Sinek?
Yes.
I've heard of that book. I haven't read it.
It's a pretty good book. I mean, he has a good process for finding out why, finding your why, as he puts it. And he has some very good examples of people who they've started with finding out why they do what they do, and then moving from there. The biggest organization that he uses is Apple. That their why is that everything they do is to challenge the status quo, and that they don't define themselves as a tech company. They define themselves as a company that challenges the status quo. So when they make something like a phone, the reason why people are so captivated by it is they feel that phone is different than all the other phones because it's challenging.
It's answering the question of make it beyond status quo. Maybe that's a bad way of putting it.
It's challenging what everyone else is doing, I would say.
Yes.
That in like the iPod, when it first came out, there were MP3 players before the iPod that came out, but they didn't take off like the iPod did.
Oh no, that was a huge hit, the iPod.
But the slogan for the iPod was 1,000 songs in your pocket. And that was the hook was it went from you have to have cassette tapes and cassette players, or you have to have a CD player, or you're listening to the radio, to you have all of that in your pocket with this device. That was challenging what the status quo was. And because it wasn't a tech company that says we make computers and
ours are the best.
We make computers and electronic devices, and they're easy to use and reasonably affordable. Do you want to buy one? They said, our company,
we're committed to doing something special.
Yes, we are committed to challenging the status quo set by other companies by making computers and electronic devices that are
this is what we produce.
That are easy to use, affordable, and well designed.
Yeah, I've heard that. I've heard exactly what you're saying in very similar structure several times. Talks, business owners, I've heard a lot of people talk about it. It's not like, hey, look at this cool item. It's, hey, let's do something great. Hey, this mission we are committed to, and then this is how we do it, and this is what we produced. And it's not, look at what we produced, and this is how we did it. That order is very very important. You have to have some meaningful reason pushing everything.
Because that's what motivates people. I mean, yes, you can have some motivation from what people produce or how they do stuff. You can say, oh, this manufacturer of
Soda bottles.
has a specific process that
They use half the plastic.
they recycle all their plastic. That's how they do it, and so that's the reason you support them. Okay, but that's not going.
Not quite as motivating.
No. Whereas if you were to say
They want to save plastic.
we want to save plastic and conserve the environment around us.
Make a more efficient, whatever, better place to live somehow or whatever.
Right. By
doing that.
using 50% less plastic by recycling and making this product.
Right. Yes.
It's
I
just
agree.
it motivates people more on a deeper level.
Yeah. So diligence. Right. And kind of circling back. I think diligence is really, it comes back to that why. And the diligence will just come in. What is diligence? I mean, what is it actually? I think that's where it comes from effectively.
Mm-hmm.
The most effective way it comes from. But like, if you want to talk about what
What diligence actually is?
as an individual piece,
Mm-hmm.
Webster's definition is steady, earnest, and energetic effort, preserving application. So that's what it actually is. But I think
Could you say that again?
steady, earnest, and energetic effort, preserving application.
Steady, earnest.
That's
And
from
energetic.
2020 Webster's. That's the
And-
2020 updated 2020 Webster's definition of diligence.
That's a good definition for it. I would say that would relate to your goal, like that would be the driving force. Well, not necessarily
The consequence of the
yes, the
driving force.
the consequence of the driving force. Sorry,
Yeah, is you're gonna work for it
consistently.
consistently. Sorry, persevering application, not preserving application.
Persevering application.
Yeah, preserving application. Yeah, no.
Okay.
Right, but that will come through. That will, you're going to keep working at it if you're driven to go somewhere.
Right.
But yeah, that's what
But-
it is. It's as its own piece.
Do you think there's a sense of false diligence, almost, if you will?
Like you're just keeping yourself busy to not feel bad about wasting your time.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah. And some people are like that. They will always, 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 always be busy because they just cannot stand sitting around and doing nothing. Is that diligence? Or is that a fake, sort of cover up for
Or is
I
it
don't
just
know.
anti-laziness?
I don't know. Maybe that is diligence. I don't think so. I feel like that's a cheap. I would think that's a cheap substitute for diligence.
Mm-hmm. Or maybe it's not diligence in its purest form.
Yeah.
That it
Yes,
could.
but you can not have that why and always be quote unquote productive, as in you are doing something useful with your time, even if it's not towards a specific end. But I don't
Yes,
think that's
but-
what. Go ahead.
Say like you aren't working towards a specific goal, but you can say you're moving forward because you're working every day and you're
Doing useful things.
yes.
Okay.
And you can say you're moving forward, but you're not moving forward with direction.
Mm-hmm.
You're just
Doing stuff.
moving forward. And
Right.
at a certain point, if you don't have a direction, how do you know which way forward really is? That would be my argument. And okay, you can make the argument that if you're working, you're making money, and that's going to help support you.
Mm-hmm.
But that's still working towards a goal of being self-sufficient, right?
Yes. Yeah, I mean, without any sort of common vision to tie everything else in, it's like, yeah, you did all this great stuff, but where's it gonna put you? Like, it's gotta, why not make it more useful and push you towards something? Whether that's being a fantastic dad or a fantastic husband, whether that's being, a supporter of whatever, your church, or, it could be a million things.
Mm-hmm.
But
or having a charity organization.
Yes, or going to heaven, or whatever. Whatever it is
or
to you.
Owning your own business.
Yeah.
There's a million different goals or visions that you could have. Beyond just getting through the day,
Mm-hmm.
if you will.
Right, and I think a lot of people, it is just, I can't feel horrible about not doing anything, because I know a lot of people like that, and I've definitely done it before, where it's like, I just gotta occupy my time. And go ahead.
How about, I have a hypothetical question for you.
Mm-hmm.
You've worked for X amount of years,
Mm-hmm.
and you've got a decent amount of money saved, and you're doing well financially,
Mm-hmm.
and you decide, I'm going to take a month off from my job.
Mhm.
You clear it with your boss or your superiors, whatever, and you're going to take a month off and you're going to take a vacation.
Mm-hmm.
Would that be slothful? Or, I mean, in this instance, sorry, you've worked for a period of years. So, do you think it would be slothful to take a extended vacation?
Like, okay, so I would say my initial was, why are you taking the extended vacation? Is there any sort of reasoning behind it? Maybe you're completely exhausted.
I mean,
and you're like, my
yeah.
body needs to regenerate.
Yeah, I would.
Or my body
I mean,
needs to
a couple
heal
of
for a
things
little
come to
while.
mind for me. I would say one, like, you're taking a vacation because you want to spend time with your family.
Yeah. Okay.
You're taking a vacation because you feel like you need a break.
Yeah, like your body needs to heal for a while.
Say you've been working for every day for 10 years straight, excluding Saturdays and Sundays, maybe, or maybe just Sundays.
Mm-hmm.
And you say, and you've been doing that for 10 years. Do you think I can take a month vacation?
I don't know, and I think that's
just to relax. That's the reason.
Just to relax. Like, if there's a reason, if it's like just because I
Because
don't
you
want to
feel-
work.
No, because you feel stressed and you feel
Yeah, if you go ahead.
like your job is weighing on you heavily at this point.
Yeah,
and
if
you feel that you haven't got that you feel like it is just in your entire life is engulfed in your work, and that's it.
if you think it'll be healthier for you to take a break, or it'll actually help you get better, or your body just needs it to keep going, yeah, take a break. Sure. But if you're like, I just don't want to work because why? Like, because I don't want to work.
So you'd say it comes down to why then?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Especially, and I mean, you can take that to way smaller of an example, like to daily basis, 15-minute increments. Like, at the end of the day, you want to just, whatever, crack open a beer and just have fun or play video games for a half hour or whatever. And I would say, like, maybe it's not the best for everybody to micromanage, but especially like over an entire month, like, have a good reason why. And then, like, if there's a good reason for it and there's going to be utility, it's going to help you reach your goals or live out your mission, or, even stay alive and not hate yourself, which long term, maybe you do need to take a break because You don't want to hate your work, and you don't want to hate your life, and you don't want to hate yourself.
And you don't want to hate your boss.
And you don't want to hate your boss. So maybe that's the best way to keep you moving towards that, even if it short term doesn't seem like it would be. Maybe that's even necessary, you know? And especially if there's a good reason, like you've been neglecting your family. Like, okay, yeah, take a break. Like, if you need money, I mean, obviously there are a lot of things. It depends on where you are. Like, if you're dad and or mom, either way, whatever, but you're responsible financially for other people, and you wouldn't be able to
support them
by taking this big break, then, you know, maybe you will have to be miserable for a little while, or, you know, maybe like you won't have that opportunity and you're going to have to find a different way to get a break or get resolution with internal conflicts or with stresses. But yeah, yes.
But you mentioned that you have to find a different way to do it. You don't just tune it out.
Right. Like if it's something that needs to happen or something that is really important to happen. Yeah. Yes. Like you gotta resolve it somehow. Eventually. Maybe it'll resolve itself. You know, we talk about, you know, facing your issues, and I think sometimes things do resolve themselves in ways that we don't necessarily have control over. That's not to say that you're not responsible for recognizing them, but I think a lot of things will also just resolve themselves because maybe that stress, resentment towards your boss, maybe it could dissipate on its own over time. But not really directly answering your question posed earlier.
No, that was a pretty good explanation, I would say. At least I'm satisfied with it.
That's good. All that's important is if you're happy, and that's the entire basis. You know, that's all I live for, man, is your happiness, you know what I mean? And your approval. Yeah, that was sarcasm.
Yeah. I know that. I just glad you said that for our listeners.
Yes.
So anyway, I think we've had a very good discussion about sloth and diligence.
You gave me plenty to think about and try and defend and refine and, you know, think about and try and come up with a better explanation for. I'm happy with what we talked about.
Yeah, I mean, you know, especially for me, some of the personal and social issues were, I thought they were really hit close to home. You know, like just becoming detached from reality, you know, not feeling upset or disturbed by certain things.
Like you don't care.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Or, you know, just filling time idly, you know, with media or movies, YouTube, video games.
Could even be something that has a facade of being productive. Like maybe you have a hobby, like woodworking or welding, but you use that to distract you
from what's really important at the time. Yeah.
Yeah, not to drive a tangent line off into nowhere in the middle of your thing, but just
No. It's okay. And we tied that into our personal lives and into the social lives or socially what we see around us.
Mm-hmm.
And then and we also talked about what we think the root problem of sloth becomes, as, you know, a lack of vision or lack of a proper goal or proper purpose for your life, and that having goals can definitely be a productive thing in the short term.
Mm-hmm.
And we talked about diligence and how it can be a side effect of having your life properly aligned and putting your priorities in order. And then we define diligence a little bit too, about how it's, consistently working towards something, working at something without becoming bored with it or losing interest, And overall, I think we had a pretty productive discussion. I know I have a lot to think about and much to improve on.
Yeah, I'm in the boat with you. Well, thank you all for tuning in to At the Root of Knowledge. On this episode, we talked about slothfulness and diligence, and we would love to hear any thoughts or comments you had about about anything we talked about this evening, and any thoughts or comments you might have about future topic ideas. Take care, and we'll see you on the next show.